I'm Brandon Dawson, and this is The Distiller, a podcast about how we find meaningful work and how we find meaning in the work we do. My guest for this episode is artist Mark Dejong. Mark is a visual artist who specializes in building house-sized projects that you can not only get inside of and move around in and interact with, but that in a couple of cases, people actually live in. After starting two projects that were more renovation than art piece last year, Mark completed a project called the Swing House. It's a 3-story red brick house that he's sort of turned into an adult playground. It's pretty amazing. We talked with Mark about his somewhat meandering path to finally being willing to call himself an artist after years in construction and renovation work. We talked about the elements that moved him away from art for a while and the specific drive, in fact, the moment that really kind of started him coming back to art. As you'll hear in our conversation, I asked Mark a number of times in a couple of different ways about his motivation or his core artistic drive. He kind of struggled to answer that question because, as is true with many of us, it's a conversation he's still having with himself. Some people seem to operate from a singular sense of drive or motivation. They're clear from the start on where they want to go and how they're going to get there. Other people find that their life's work is the pursuit of that question, and that's definitely true with Mark. Mark and I sat down over a couple of drinks on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. You may even hear the thunder in the background as we talked. We talked at the Comet in Northside. It's a classic Cincinnati neighborhood bar known for its Tuesday night biker nights, Sunday night bluegrass with the Comet Bluegrass All-Stars. The Comet is one of those perfect places. A lot has changed about Cincinnati since I moved here 13 years ago. The Comet has remained blissfully, reassuringly the same. I spent several years, a few years ago, in construction myself, so I actually really enjoyed talking with Mark about the work itself, about the physical satisfaction that comes from being exhausted at the end of a good day's work. But I also really liked the kind of meandering discussion of what it means to realize you want to have more of an impact in the world, but not be 100% clear on how or what you want to say. Mark's openness about that process and about the need to figure it out anew every day was familiar and reassuring to me. I hope it will be so to you as well. Here it is. Here's my conversation with artist Mark Dejong on The Distiller. So, Mark, you do a bunch of things, and rather than me try and encapsulate what those are, if I was to ask you, what do you do? What do you do?
That's a kind of a question I struggle with.
Well, that's why we're here. So that's okay. We got a lot of time to unpack it.
Part of it's in transition. So
okay,
it's really what kind of comes forth in the future might make it easier for me to define what I do. Mm-hmm. My background, way back, meaning college years, was fine arts.
Okay.
I pursued that, but during the whole process of me being in school, I always worked in construction.
Okay.
Worked with houses. And ultimately, after school, that's where I went back to. And at some point, I left art entirely and really just pursued the construction.
Okay.
And then about 5-6 years ago, I bought a house on my street where I live, and I really brought back that fine art background and joined it together with my construction. That was the first of 3 houses, and right now I'm in my 3rd house, and this particular house is much more in the realm of the art than the construction, where the previous 2 houses were, I would say, more in the construction that had art elements in it.
Okay.
So transition, there's still a big question of how it's all going to pan out. It's there's money to be made to be able to support my life. So
yep, I hear you. So going back to the art degree, you went to DAAP, which for people that don't know, I sort of feel like people outside of Cincinnati don't really even have a sense of what Cincinnati is, much less some of the things that Cincinnati has to offer. DAAP is the University of Cincinnati's College of Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning, which in that world, the sense that I get, I'm not a visual artist or a fine artist, but the sense that I get is that DAAP is a pretty highly reputed, well-respected program that turns out some really good folks.
Yes. Yeah.
What was your specialization when you were at DAAP?
So I was at DAAP, correct?
Okay.
I was only there for 2.5 years.
Okay.
When I was there, I did fine arts. I took, instead of like actually enrolling in a program, I kind of made a choice after high school. I didn't want to go deep into art or deep into school.
Yeah.
So I chose to do just classes. And
Right on.
I played with a lot of fine art classes. Took ultimately some courses that would work towards a degree.
Yep.
A 3-year break after those 2.5 years in. Then I returned to school a little bit at DAAP
Okay.
for, I think, just a semester before I transferred to Alfred University
Okay.
in upstate New York.
Right on.
So, but Cincinnati, really important school.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful things about it is that they have this really practical aspect where they place students in the real world. They go all over the country, and I think it's a really smart, good program.
Right on.
Yeah.
And so then you, by the sound of it, you left that all behind. You were doing construction for several years and
Yeah.
weren't dabbling, weren't trying to balance things, were really focused on construction and remodeling and that kind of work. Is that
That's right.
accurate? Okay.
That's right. So I got back, I would say, from when I got done with Alfred University in '93. I got a degree. I came back to Cincinnati, like many people. I thought I was just coming back here as a temporary stopover point before I kind of gathered myself and moved on. In the end, I did move on a couple of times, but ultimately came back.
Yeah.
When I returned, I did a show very shortly afterwards here in Cincinnati. I made a decision to go ahead and try to make it in me working with art.
Okay.
So I spent a couple years doing one other big show in Portland. I did a residency in Montauk, New York. But it was this realization that me working inside the studio and working and thinking myself as an artist that works in the studio creating objects just wasn't working. It wasn't like going into my studio and just like dying to be there.
Right.
I loved it in moments, but it wasn't consistent enough for me to just say that's going to work for me.
What kind of work was that you were doing in the studio?
I was trying to play with different materials, so I was doing soldered tin. That was kind of the last thing I did. Working with metal, but throughout my experience, whether it was early on in DAAP or afterwards in Alfred and post Alfred, a lot of my projects had architecture in it.
Okay.
So I would always kind of felt like it was there. But right before I stopped, I was doing stuff with metal,
Okay.
like kind of sheet metal.
Right on.
And I was like, I think 96 when I said, I'm done.
Okay. And then the break was how long before you got back into it with the houses?
In 2012, I wouldn't say I was done back into art at that point. I think it was a slow
That was
process.
when you bought the first house?
That was the first house on my street where I made a conscious decision. I saw a show down at the Weston Gallery.
Okay.
It was related around architecture, and it made me really think about what I was doing, and I felt like I wanted to have, or I should say, be part of the cultural conversation of what it means to be alive today. And one of the best ways that I could do that was to make art and work with what I know so well, which is houses and construction. So I don't think it was really conscious at that point. It's like, I'm going to do this. This is going to be my new path. When I got done with that house, it's now what I call a circle house. I had a short break where I didn't work on another house. And then I bought another home here in Northside, and that became the Square House. I bought that with full intention to take it, fix it up, and sell it. I had done that 3 other times just prior to me getting the Circle House, which is in Camp Washington. So I just went back to that model.
Okay.
That Circle House, I thought maybe I would sell it. And with the first renters, I gave them that opportunity. Ultimately, I had to kind of pull back because the new model of who I am, what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Before I could fix up a place and sell it. Once I got done with these new houses, they just became part of me in a way that
they're your work now.
Yeah,
they're not
they're
just
different.
something that you're going to sell.
They're different.
So do you still own both the Circle House and the Square House?
Not the Square House.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Square House, I made a decision to sell, but it was kind of like I was still in that mode. I would say that I fix up houses, like that house was purposely bought with the intention to buy and sell, and so that's what I did.
Okay.
And there was some regret, I would say. My great grace in that whole experience is that Reggie and Aaron, the couple that bought that place, are just amazing, and they're incredible stewards of the house, and we're friends, and so I'm blessed with great stewards, and know that the house is in great hands.
So, there's that break. You're doing, you're paying the bills. You're doing the remodeling and the construction work. And when you started to get back into it, when you dipped the toe back in, what was different about the way you were going to approach it at that point versus doing the studio work and the tin work and things like that? That you said there were moments there that kind of would get into your heart, but that you didn't feel like that was where you wanted to be all the time. Was there something that was different about how you were approaching it? Was it where the culture was at and what you felt like you wanted to say at that point?
Well, I think with the Square House, because it's with the Swing House, my big project that's really
and the most recent,
giving most traction and has the greatest, I would say, expression of art. With the Square House, I was still kind of thinking along those lines of just doing contract buyer of houses and selling them. So when things were different, were with the Swing House. It was a really conscious choice even to enter into that project. I knew that unlike the Circle or Square House, where they're viable projects where I could buy them at a certain price, fix them up, and know I could sell them for a profit. And just, that was great. With the Swing House, it was making a choice to enter into something where I knew I would not sell it. And the layout of expense on the front side to go ahead and put in the beams and just all the work that I did to put it together, I knew there was going to be no immediate income source. So it was a real choice difference. Like, I was just entering into, I would say, a little bit of a choice of luxury. I didn't have to support a family that might have made it so I couldn't do this project.
A little bit of context for people. We talked about the three houses, and I'll describe what I understand them to be, and you can kind of correct me. The Circle House is a livable house, like you said. The Square House is a livable house, basically with the circles and squares as a thematic, artistic element through the design of the house. But it doesn't change the function of the house.
That's right.
Necessarily. The Swing House, and you can find all of these online. If people Google this, you can see photos of them and stuff. The Swing House is Mark's. When did you finish that? When did the Swing House open up?
I would say kind of officially last November. So I had a round of open houses. The art was done in the basement. That's in there right now. The house where people could stay in it maybe a year plus ago. A year ago.
So it's still a livable house, but it's first a work of art. And it is, for people that don't know and haven't seen it, and like I said, you can find it all online. It's a 3-story, 4-story?
It's a 3-story.
3-story red brick house that the interior of has largely been structurally removed except for the staircases, and there is a 3-story high
The staircase
swing.
is gone.
Oh, is it?
The stairs are gone. Everything's gone.
It's now at the CAC. It's where
that's
the staircase is.
Right.
But inside of it, it's just a giant swing. It's a house-sized, beautiful swing that you can go into when it's open and experience a house in a whole new way. And I would encourage people. We'll put links on the website and all of that to photos. And if people here in Cincinnati, they can check it out and go visit it when it's open. But just a little bit of that context for people. So it is. You said there's still inhabitable space in there.
So the big difference there, like you said, the Circle and Square House, they still function completely as livable houses. Where I would say the art doesn't interfere with the living. Where the program at the Swing House, all the choices are made based on the arc of the swing. So wherever whatever cleared, in essence,
Right.
the arc of the swing is where things were placed.
Okay.
So the kitchen, it's placed in the front of the house. Somebody working at the sink could, in theory, work there making dinner
While somebody's still
while
swinging.
swinging overhead.
Oh, wow.
And the bed, which is closer to the center, again, it's just clearing your feet barely. Somebody could be sleeping in bed
Right.
and be uninterrupted by somebody swinging.
And I mentioned this earlier. I don't know how long. There's currently an exhibit of your work at the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati, which is sort of an exhibit around, obviously you can't fit the swing house in the CAC, but it's the
Right.
original staircase has been deconstructed and reconstructed on its side
That's
inside
right.
the CAC, and there's video of it. So if people are in Cincinnati or coming through town, do you know how long that exhibit runs at the CAC?
It runs till September 2nd.
Okay, so plenty of time through the summer
Yes.
for people
It's
to
a
go
nice,
check all of that out.
Decently length show.
Yep.
Decently show. Yep.
So in that transition, are you still doing construction work now? Or are you fully out of that and doing artwork?
I'm doing it for a few friends that help me with certain projects, and I'm kind of returning the favor. Some of them years later.
Yeah.
When I was in the swing house process, I did not take any jobs.
Okay.
So there's no paying jobs per se at this point. Yeah.
And you've transitioned fully into that. How has your perception of sort of like who you are and what you do? I mean, that's a big shift, I would imagine, with 100 little decisions or not so little decisions all the way. Like, has it changed who you are as a person? Do you feel?
I don't know. I think you're always kind of the same. I still have this kind of the same amount of frustrations, or just different. I have maybe the same amount of highs, or just different, or lows. I would say I'm kind of the same. Yeah.
Is the the way that you described the work in the studio, that you felt like there were moments there where you really wanted to be there, but there were other times where you didn't? Do you feel like your artistic vision and what you're honing in now is really where you found like the passion that makes you want to work on this?
Yeah,
stuff?
and it's interesting because I'm still kind of navigating that. What I realized, there's a lot of art that I made, a lot of studio-based art that I made for the Contemporary Art Center show. I'm having to ask myself the question whether I'd make that art if given just free time, like just to be able to make art. Would I do that? And I'm really learning the answer is no. That work really comes out of a house project, and that's where it kind of sits. So I like the next project that I do when I have a new one coming up. I'm not really sure the amount of art that will come out of it. I do know of just 2 pieces that are coming out of it. Unlike the swing house, which had a lot of work, the next one might have very little work, which is kind of cool. I mean, I guess like that studio part, it makes sense to me only in context, like having the show at the CAC, or having the basement where I knew that I had a gallery in the swing house itself. I knew I wanted to make work that lived in those spaces. So I would say, yeah, I've kind of found myself in a different way here at this juncture where I know the houses are the impetus for any art I make, and they're really they are the piece of art at this point with the swing house and ultimately the stair house, my next project. So
The stair house is the name of the next project?
Yep.
Do you want to share anything about that?
Sure. If it all works out right and everything proceeds as I plan and envision, the swing house and stair house are neighbors. They're right next to each other.
Cool.
And the stair house will be a study in similarities and contrasts to the swing house. So it will be opened up. It's brick as well as the swing house. It'll be opened up 3 stories, about 3 feet inside. There'll be a steel structure to help support it. But the houses themselves are quite different. And what I do with it will be quite different. How I treat the walls, how I treat the living space. and ultimately front and center are the stairs.
Okay.
What was so beautiful, what a great gesture that existed in the swing house, and what exists at the CAC were those stairs, and it makes sense with this new house that those stay behind.
Cool. And it's not something that you've started yet? You're sort of in the planning stages of it?
I would say more planning at this point. I'm trying to take a break. It's important for me to take breaks. I've never had a project like the swing house where when I work on a project, I'm all in. I don't really travel. I will do social engagements, but it's almost like if I had my druthers, I would just be working on the project.
Focused on it.
So it's intense. It's like, and because of the show, it was 3.5 years that I was just fully focused. So I'm excited, but also kind of know I have to pace myself.
So practically in that time, how are you, you still have bills to pay. I mean, are you operating on like a patronage model? Is this something that like you've set up over years, like you've saved up to do, or do you have people supporting that work? Like, how are you making that transition from the construction work being how you pay the bills and eat to doing the art? Right.
So that is a big question. I think a lot of people do ask that question of me. I did well with my business. I'm also Dutch, proudly Dutch, in that I'm very frugal. So my needs are very kind of small.
Okay.
It was easy enough for me to save up money enough to do this project.
Right on.
That said, it only can go so far.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out that next step. So patronage, or grants or something along those lines will be necessary for me to kind of keep on doing what I keep on.
Cool. Well, the swing house has gotten a lot of press and some good publicity, so hopefully it helps with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the kind of that driving force of getting you back after the break into the art was that you had gone to an exhibit at the Meyerson Gallery. Weston Gallery.
Yes, yeah.
And that specifically, if I recall the words you said, that you wanted to be a voice in the world, or that you wanted to have something to say.
That's right.
Talk about that. Like what is it you wanted to say? Where did the impulse come from? If you remember back to that, like what impact did you want to have, and how do you feel that the swing house and the work that you're doing now, what are you saying? Like, what's the impetus there in terms of the creative message?
I don't know what I'm saying. I kind of know what I'm saying, and I can put words to it a bit, but what I just recognized more than anything else is that I had a skill, and you just kind of have to go with what feels really natural. And I knew that I had a language with fine arts and house construction, or housecraft, as I call it. So I had an interest in architecture, housecraft, and art. And so that I felt like that's something that, in any one of those fields, I feel like there are people that are much better than I am. There are carpenters, craftspeople that are just much more skilled than I am, or artists as individuals I'm completely in awe of, or architects that just blow me away. But I have all those three, they're greater than their sum.
Like the Venn diagram, like that center point is your your area.
So the condensing of those 3 points, it gives me a strength in a way that I haven't seen, in a way that, or at least in a way that I felt like I can say something.
Yeah. What is that word housecraft that you use? What does that mean to you specifically?
It's like really anybody that's in the trades with residential construction, in particular residential. That's where I find my, I would say my heart. It's residential construction. It's anybody that's really a master at what they do. So it's whether it's, I'm trying to think, like a person that makes boats. I can't remember what the name of the master of whatever trade it is. So housecraft is a very general word, kind of encompassing anybody that's in the craft world around making houses and are masters. That's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I for several years in between different stints. I worked as a framer and a finished carpenter.
Oh, right on.
And I worked for a guy out in Idaho for a little while who was the master, is what you're describing. A little guy named Tom Curiel, who there was nothing he couldn't do. We jacked up 100-year-old churches and excavated basements under him, and
he probably loved it.
Oh yeah, and he was great.
Yeah,
and it was that he would stand back, and he always had a stub of a cigar in his teeth, and he would just love to stand back and chew on that unlit cigar and try to figure out the puzzle of what we were going to do. The guy taught me more than I learned, almost anywhere else, in terms of just taking something and the craft of, there's a lot of chopping wood and carrying water. There's a lot of stuff that just has to be done. But there's a place in every one of those where you get to make a decision that somebody else might make a different decision. And I loved watching him do those things, watching him make those decisions. Great. Do you, like, when you were doing the construction stuff, how much did you think about like mastery and craft? And because sometimes that's a little bit of a luxury. Sometimes it is just, I got to cut the board, I got to swing the hammer. Like, was that going into your thinking back then, or was the lack of it sort of what got you out of it?
Let's see. So I think I have something that I always call a grace as a trait, which is I can do mundane tasks for prolonged periods. Try to find a Zen moment within it. Yeah. So I was kind of blessed with being able to do boring tasks, which is really important, which can be very much an asset. Yeah. And like you said, carrying buckets of water, cutting the wood, whatever. Yep. Let's see, what else was I going to say about that? Ask me a question again.
Well, just when you were doing that, when it wasn't fulfilling the creative side of you, how much attention were you paying to that craftsmanship and mastery side of it?
So I was also experiencing, I would say, a little bit of ADD at another side, where I would learn a craft and I would take on a more challenging craft. Initially, I started with house painting, then plaster wall restoration, ultimately carpentry, and then where I really spent a lot of time as a subcontractor was having a business where I did natural wood finishes, whether restorative or new.
Yep. And in a city like Cincinnati, I got to imagine there's a ton of that work.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think so. I would learn things pretty darn well, but once I learned them pretty well, that's where I leave to. I'll move on. So, and that's where I'm at right now. I can kind of do anything. I can do it pretty well. Yeah. But I've seen people in any one of those trades that are way beyond me. Right. So, and what I put together, like a place like Swing House, it's great, it's wonderful, but yeah, there's people that can do any one of those trades better than I can, for sure. Right.
Yeah, that's really, that sounds familiar to me. I have, I've sometimes described like the number of things that I've done over the course of my professional life to people, and they'll say something, I'll be like, no, it's not, it's just lack of attention. It's just it's a short attention span is all that is I got 2 years on any enterprise, and then I'm like moving on to it. Yeah. But getting in there and finding the thing, it's why I'm doing this, is because getting in and finding the thing that is the neat thing about it. Yeah. Whether it's framing and carpentry or any number of other things is what I enjoy about it. But I feel like once I've unlocked the puzzle, then I need a new puzzle to unlock.
Yeah, and but like talking earlier, I'm like got my passion right now, but I got no idea where it's gonna go. Right. Like what happens to Swing House or the Stair House, it might morph into something completely different, because maybe I'm a little restless at that point. I've kind of done it, and I want that model to change. So
on these houses, are you doing all the work? Are you bringing people in?
I might bring people in. So like the Circle House and Square House were very conventional, and I brought in a lot of subcontractors. I had painters, plumbers, electricians, lots of people. Okay. The projects would proceed on at a very, I would say, not aggressive, but logical pace. 6 months to 8 months to totally redo a place. With the Swing House, it was 3 years, which is 7 times the amount of time, 8 times or whatever. So it was a
Yeah,
lot
it's a
longer.
big commitment.
Big commitment.
Time and energy.
A lot of, I had to kind of go through it kind of slowly just to kind of feel what I wanted. A lot of decisions were made in the moment. The simple program of me doing what I did was all about the swing, and that never changed. Nothing changed in that arena. The only thing that really changed is all the decisions around it.
Right.
So,
Do you remember when the first genesis of the swing house idea came to you?
oh yeah,
What can you talk about that? What
sure,
was it?
yeah. It was back when I was at DAAP.
Okay.
So this is shortly after I started there, and probably '87 or so, biking around downtown with my mountain bike. I would spend time just in OTR. I would go into these old abandoned buildings, and the textures of the walls and the stories they kind of told completely seduced me. I just loved it. And at that point, I don't know I can't say it was an exact moment, but that story of me and the swing house, and as I started talking about it a few years back, friends from that period that I was reaching out to were like, "What? You're doing that project?
That thing you talked about all those years ago? Yeah.
You're doing the swing house?" So it's kind of coming back. So it's been 30 years of an idea.
Yeah.
And I live across the street from the house. It was a house that was perfect in terms of size, shape, and the state it was in. It would have been torn down by the city. Okay. So I kind of felt like I had to do it, which is kind of cool because I probably wouldn't have done it only because it's so darn intimidating.
Yeah.
Getting in there for the first, act and being able to follow through.
What state was it in when you first walked into that place?
It was in bad shape. It had been,
Was it officially condemned? Was it?
not official, but the city had put boards up in it. When they condemn it, it's a very particular process.
Right.
But they had put boards over the empty windows.
Yep. All the warnings on it.
Yeah, keep out.
Yep.
The man that lived there and ultimately died just a year and a half ago, his wife passed away while they were living together unexpectedly, and it flipped his life upside down. This is a man who was a gentle person, and I knew him, living on a street, and we collectively as a neighborhood saw his life fall apart. And he got into the wrong world or wrong side of the tracks, created habits, developed habits where he had to feed the habits.
Yeah.
It was right during that time after the recession where scrap prices are really high, and that became a real avenue for being able to feed the habit. So
Collecting scrap metal.
yeah, and from the house he lived in. So
Right.
yeah, so he really gutted the house. He ripped out the heating system, all electrical work.
Yeah.
He even scrapped out the aluminum windows.
That's crazy. I mean, for it's a thing in Cincinnati is that because there has been so much empty or abandoned housing stock, like people will go out and rip out the copper and rip out the radiators and sell them for scrap metal. I know the prices have dropped a little bit, but I never sort of heard of a story of somebody doing that for their own house to feed their habits.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was
quite
painful.
a metaphor.
Yep. Yeah. So I actually say the house was cannibalized by the man. It's more like he cannibalized his life.
Yeah.
The house was part of that cannibalization process.
Wow. Did that factor into the decisions you made when you were doing the house? I mean, it seems like it'd be easy if you're the kind of person who entertains these ideas to sort of see the ghosts of that house living on and what you created in the swing house.
Well, yeah, that story is always with me. He was actually still in the neighborhood when I started. It was a lawsuit that the city kind of offers as a way to be able to kind of strip the title.
Yeah.
So he was still in the neighborhood while I had to go through that process. So that was a journey I had to navigate. I reveal the history of past tenants, and that story, that personal story, isn't expressed in the walls. Like when you walk into space, it's not there. It's not important. It wasn't really the story I wanted to tell.
Okay.
It was about past lives. That's the story I want to tell. So whether it's me revealing the original craftsman's work, or all the choices that were made, what sequential tenets of the house,
Yep.
all the color choices they made, modification choices.
Yeah.
Those were the things I wanted to really reveal and speak. So it's not so much the personal story as much as the choices they made, because I think the choices are kind of representations of lives, if you will.
Yeah.
They're manifestations, physical manifestations of humans.
Right.
So
Do you feel like there are questions you're consistently coming at in the work that you do, questions that you're trying to answer for yourself, or
yeah, well, one of the biggest is just how do I fit into the art world, or I'm straddling, I would say a bridge between art and construction and architecture. I feel comfortable and confident that, of those three I described, architecture, housecraft, art, I'm most closely associated and akin with art. But it's such a different model. It's not a model that is easily transferable into a museum setting.
Yeah.
It happened with the CAC, which felt great. And it really, I would say, made me really think about what I made and did. But it's definitely something I wrestle with is, what do I fit in? What do I fit in? I'm not really quite sure. So
is it a question that you feel like is getting any answers? Does
part of it, the CAC would be an affirmation for sure.
Yeah, right. Having some
Absolutely.
success on some level sort of lets you,
Yep.
gives a validation
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it happened again, if I had another show,
Right.
I think that would be probably the ultimate validation outside of the city.
Yeah.
That would be, really important. Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. Do you feel that idea of sort of like the cross section between craft, what you described as housecraft, all the elements that go into that, and the transition of those? It seems to me like the housecraft idea of it would never go away because that is the skill that you bring to art. Do you feel like you're still honing that housecraft idea, or does it feel like you kind of gathered up a bunch of skills and now you're giving those out?
Yeah, gather them up, and yes, I don't think I would say that's not my focus. Is trying to hone those skills and make them better. If I could do my next project where I'm not that involved, like the swing house, I really did so much of the craft. This next project, I would love it to be in a place where I let other people do it.
Right.
As much as possible, ultimately, because that's kind of where I have to go, as I get older. And it's also for me to continue doing it. If I want to do another house, I can't be doing what I'm doing right now.
Can't be doing every
three.
single.
Yeah, because even though the work was 3 years, 3.5 years, I need breaks, 1 or 2 year breaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens in those breaks for you?
I go crazy to start working on another project.
You get to where the energy
gets
itself going?
Yeah, I go. It's hard for me to kind of just be. Sometimes in the past I've done client work. I do have properties that I rent out and maintain. For me, I have to do maintenance on those properties, so it's a good time really for me to kind of collect those projects that need to get done and focus on those. So a lot of times roof work,
Right.
attention, yeah.
It seems to me like maybe Cincinnati is one of the few places in the United States where an artist like you could do what you're doing, because there is that sort of historical
Yeah, for sure.
housing stock that exists here that can be worked with and molded. You can't do that in a younger city. You can't do that in a city where the housing stock is too expensive to do what you're doing
Exactly.
with it.
Yep.
Do
Yep.
you have your sights on other neighborhoods or stories that you want to tell that way?
Not present. Not at this point. I feel like Camp Washington really offers a lot of the architecture I like, particularly my street, I'll be busy with that. Of course, I've got the next house, but also another one beyond it that I'll do. But it could happen in other neighborhoods. I'm just busy, busy where I'm at.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What do you think about kind of on the meta level, like the culture of work? You've gone through this process where you've sort of, it sounds like, if I'm not mischaracterizing it, like you've meandered a bit. You started out in one area, you went to another area. Some of that, if I pick up what you're saying, right, was out of necessity and out of a lack of maybe clarity about what you wanted to do. And here you've really honed in on something that you want to do, but the American culture around work often doesn't afford people the ability to do that, either to meander for a while or to hone in on what their particular vision is, unless they're willing to do something really outside the norm to do it. And
Unless you get validation,
right,
either through grants or often if you can make money somehow. So,
right.
And they're quite elusive, those two, for a lot of artists.
Yeah. There's not like a historical patronage model.
Right.
There's some, especially for web vehicles, there's a lot of that coming around where people can do something via like an online subscription model for art that can be consumed that way. But something that you're doing that requires a physical space and a physical encounter with it is a harder thing to get people from all over the world to give you $10 a piece.
Yeah.
To do.
Yeah. And I don't, I do my open houses, and I love that it's free. I mean, I feel like it's of Cincinnati. It's a Cincinnati story to some degree. I want it to be embraced by the city. And I love that it's free. Yeah.
Are you at a point in the work that you're doing where you're sort of thinking of, you obviously have a signature thing that your last three works have been, that the house and housecraft and how it relates to this is your model. Is there a consistent story that you see that you want to tell over the life of however long that you're doing this? I mean, you talked about the story of like the inhabitants and the historical story of the space, which is wonderful. Like that, honestly, there's that old saying, if these walls could talk, and it's like you are giving voice to them to be able to do that. But then there's also the thing that you're saying through bringing all these voices out. And it sounds, you said you're figuring it out as you go still, which is great. But like, what do you think that story is? What do you think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to look back and sort of see as the cohesive thread in the work that you're doing? Or what do you want it to be if it's not really developed yet?
Yeah, I would say it's going back to, I don't really know, I think it's a metaphor, the way I work with my houses, or that process that I've developed it, where I've gone from being a house painter to doing carpentry to having my own business and slowly stepping into buying houses, selling them, then slowly stepping into making them art pieces. I don't know. I don't know what the story is.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like you have to kind of trust the process. That's what I always go back to. Like, I was not with a lot of confidence when I started out, and I had to kind of start at a really basic level. But once I got my footing, I would say, then doors opened, and I just kind of went wherever doors opened, wherever they took me. And I kind of feel like that's where I'm at right now. So I don't know what I'm going to say in the end, and probably the best way to say it's just a metaphor for living a life that's just kind of opening doors and kind of going what feels like a natural place to go. I always will have an umbrella of the houses as kind of related to kind of a personal autobiographical story. There's that for sure.
Yeah.
I see houses and the way they can tell stories. I see them also as metaphors for us as individuals that can tell stories. So I don't know where it's going to go. I just kind of feel like I'm trying to navigate. I wish in some ways I knew clearly where I was going, because I probably wouldn't feel the frustrations I feel right now, as I have to kind of sit quietly, having my break and kind of consider my next step.
What are those frustrations?
Finding my place, understanding where I fit.
Still doing that,
in the world. Just kind of being still with myself and being comfortable with that stillness, which I exercise. There are days that I call are very soft, where things don't happen, where I might have ideas of doing something and it doesn't go that way, and I just have to kind of accept it. Which is also the process in building a house. Always have the expectations and they aren't met, and you have to kind of navigate that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Is it? I think it's easy at all levels to look at anybody who's at a different level and think they've achieved something.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy. I could imagine it would be easy for somebody who's just a couple years behind you in their process, or still in college, or still in high school and trying to figure this out, to say, well, he's done these things. These are big things, 3 houses. He's got this piece in the CAC. Obviously, he's secure in himself and what he's doing. And part of what you're telling me is that's not the case. I mean, are there days for you now where you're still wrestling with, is this the thing? Or
sometimes I think I'm gonna, I wouldn't say stop the art process, but just step back.
Yeah.
Kind of go step back and don't do the big art house projects. They're just too exhausting in a way.
Yeah.
They're great. Part of me wants to go back to the more simple model of just buying a house, fixing it up, putting some art elements in it, and
the thing you've done before, the thing you can do.
And it's a safe place.
Yeah.
I probably won't go back there, but it's I've been in this place before, where I'm, when I was doing that model, I was like, forget this, I'm gonna go back to my client work.
Right.
And it's, I don't know, that's where you're always up against that edge of being in the present, but the future is still, I'm totally open and I would say uncertain of where it's gonna go, but always open, always like try to leave myself open to whatever opportunity kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I ask, because that's coming through. I think it's important sometimes for people to hear that even with the success
we don't know
that
what the
you've
hell
achieved,
we're doing.
right? Yeah, no, everybody's figuring it out. There have been people on this show that I've talked to who've had the most linear, straightforward paths, who, when you talk to them, say, I think about quitting every day, or I think about doing something else every day. Yeah. And I think if I'm learning anything in the conversations that I'm having with people, it's that nobody's got it figured out.
Yeah.
You figure it out every day. You do.
Yeah.
When would you say in your process that you are, if I can put it this way, the most settled? Because your process involves like years of planning and then years of execution, and then also like the press and all of that stuff, and the promotion of what you're doing, and hopefully a good solid period of enjoyment that other people are getting out of it, like the satisfaction of a job well done. Where in all of that are you most yourself and the happiest with what you're doing?
When I'm working, I mean, simply, there's no, I always say no disrespect to my friends, family, and things I do, but there's something that's so deeply satisfying in terms of feeling settled with myself when I have a good day at work.
What is specifically, what does a good day at work mean for you? And I mean, get as granular as you want.
It can be as mundane as carrying buckets and seeing change happen, being physical. It can be making some key decisions that moves my work forward in a different direction, which opens up some clarity around some problems I was having. But often it's physical work, exertion, just being physical and kind of, It's just a different. It's not comparable to other, I would say, highs that can happen from social or dancing. Dancing is its own whole different thing, which I did a lot of, but and it has its own amazing, wonderful journey. But doing that physical work, just having that at the end of the day, looking back and just knowing that it was a great day. Yeah, there's no better feeling.
Yep. Feeling it in your body, knowing that you did something, that you made some progress.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Everything's, a micro. It's very like in the moment in many ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I feel like over the course of my life, I go back and forth between the things that give me sort of intellectual stimulation and that feeling of having tackled a problem or having thought about something in a new way, and then wanting something that gives me more of that physical sense of, yes, I have put my body, I've done things with my hands that resulted in a physical change in the environment today.
Yeah.
And that's a great feeling too. I absolutely get that.
Yeah.
Well, so you're in the planning process for the stair house right now. Have you purchased the house?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes. One of the main pieces at the show at the Contemporary Arts Center is circles I extracted from the stair house.
Okay, great. And when do you think you'll actually start sort of whatever constitutes full progress, moving forward, construction?
I got no idea. And I think that's a little bit hard. I've got a lot of things I have to kind of get done prior to that. Some of that relates to, I would say, my online presence, doing website development, that kind of stuff. I've been ignoring that. I'm very cognizant that needs to get attention right now. Funding, trying to understand if there's a possibility to actually get some funding for it.
Cool.
Those are two of the things that are in front of it. Really, the idea of what has to happen, it's done. I mean, it's
You're ready to go.
unlike the swing house. This one's almost fully baked.
Cool.
I kind of know exactly what needs to happen.
Are you getting better at this as you go? At this particular thing you do? I mean,
yeah. But it's different. Like, the swing house, it was such a big project, and I had to be intimate with it. I just had to be, and it's also a very autobiographical, like I said, so kind of a self-portrait of sorts. But it's given me, I would say, a lot of the tools for me to feel confident to start this next project, kind of know what I have to do.
Right.
And would love to kind of just get bodies on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get started. Get that feeling back in your body
Yeah.
of those days of work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
And then be part of it still. I would still be physical. It'd still be part of it. But again, it's just like, this is what kind of makes sense. I'm going to try to make what makes sense happen.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen, I have to kind of ask some, tough questions at that point.
There comes that puzzle again.
Yeah. Where I have to kind of like back off and I don't know.
Yeah.
Where things could change and just become different than what they are.
But that's great. I mean, it seems like that's the difference between doing the thing and not doing the thing. Is taking another step. Is taking, moving one step forward and seeing if you can do it this time, if you can put it together. And it seems like that's what you're figuring out about yourself, is that's where you need to be. Well, thanks for talking us through it. Thanks for talking about your work, and we will be watching to see what happens with the stair house.
Well, thanks. It was great sitting down and having a drink
My
this
pleasure.
afternoon. With the rain out there,
It's a
feel like
beautiful
I would
day.
crawl in bed or something.
I know, right? Well, thank you.
Cheers.
Mark. It's a
Yep.
pleasure.
Thanks.
This episode of The Distiller was recorded live at The Comet, located at 4579 Hamilton Avenue in Cincinnati, Ohio's Northside neighborhood. The Comet is Northside's living room because, as the owner, Dave Cunningham, said, someone turns 21 every day. Our sincere thanks to Dave, to Sandy, and to the staff of The Comet for hosting us for this episode and welcoming us in on this rainy Tuesday. Please do visit our website at thedistillerpodcast.com, where we have links to The Comet's website. You can see their calendar events, learn more about the place, and we also link to their Facebook page as well, so check it out. Thanks again so much to artist Mark Dejong for joining us on this episode. You can find links to Mark's projects, including the Circle House and the Square House, as well as some links to the press coverage about the Swing House and some of Mark's other work on our website as well at thedistillerpodcast.com. Please do check it out. It's not the same as walking through one of his physical locations, but it's a great way to see the scope of his project if you can't step into one here in Cincinnati. And by all means, if you live in Cincinnati, please do go and check it out. The Swing House is in Camp Washington. The Distiller is produced, recorded, and hosted by me, Brandon Dawson, with co-production and booking from Terry Heist. Our show is mixed and edited by Justin Golden. Our logo was designed by Scott Ryan, and our videos are by Mike Helm of Minute Moments Pictures. You can find The Distiller wherever you listen to podcasts. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and on our YouTube channel, where we have closed caption versions of our audio podcasts for the hearing impaired. Wherever you listen, please do subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released, and also please rate or review The Distiller on whatever platform you listen on. Ratings are gold for a show like ours, so we would appreciate it if you take the time. As always, you can download episodes, find information including links, photos of the guests, and a map of all the places we have recorded The Distiller, and get in touch with us all at thedistillerpodcast.com or by email, mail@thedistillerpodcast.com. You can write us to suggest people you think should be on the show to talk about their search for meaningful work, somewhere interesting we should record the show, or something interesting we should drink while doing it. And whether you do so by email, on the website, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, we always love to hear from you. So until next time, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.